Welcome to the new users tips and tricks session. My name is Tara Knapp, and I am the president of the Quantum User Exchange Group. All of us Q Group board members are volunteers, so my real job is as a business systems manager for Avmax Group of companies. I work for the corporate development department. Under this department, I'm responsible for maintaining Quantum, upgrading, taking care of user issues, implementing the new functionality. I'm responsible for our BPI department, otherwise known as the Business Process Improvement Department, where we're trying to increase profitability and quality control through standardizing business practices and implementing new software. I recently acquired the training department as well. This doesn't just include Quantum training, it's our regulatory and safety training, all under this new corporate development department. But I could talk about Avmax for hours, and that's not why we're here today. So let's get into new users, tips, and tricks. In this session, I'm going to cover getting new users started. What does a front-end system mean? Common terms and commonalities throughout the system, hotkeys and customizing your screens and windows, what fetch size means, a couple of others cool buttons that we found, and we'll go over a Quantum hierarchy. So getting new users started. Let's go see what the new users see when they first open Quantum. Anytime you see this little picture pop up here with the Quantum icon, that means I should be switching over to Quantum. So bear with me while I switch my screen share. Okay, this is Quantum, as many of you may have noticed. Definitely for a new user, when they first log in and get this big giant gray screen, it is extremely intimidating. There is nowhere on this page for your eyeballs to rest. And certainly when you're first getting started, you always want to prompt the new user with the very first step so they gain a little bit of confidence. So what we're doing with our new users is we're telling them to always click on this inventory button first. The inventory control button opens up the inventory module. We end up calling this our home screen. And this is mostly because every single one of our businesses uses aircraft parts, be it the spares business, which is all parts, our shops, our MROs, maintenance facilities, that sort of thing. Everybody uses parts. So it's definitely a good place to get started. Now my eyeballs are not lost on the screen. I have lots of different information to look at. So now we have to teach people how to look at information and how to navigate past that very first button. So let me switch back over to my presentation. I can figure out where all the buttons are. And we'll reshare the PowerPoint. All right. So Quantum has a steep learning curve. Starting with that big gray screen, obviously there's going to be a lot of learning to go from pressing the very first button. But this curve isn't quite really the curve I like to talk about. I like to use this squiggly curve because I think Quantum learning is a lot more intricate than just a straight up curve upwards. So here we're going to go through this very first upwards motion. This is when we're starting to train our new users. They're usually sitting with other users and getting some OJT time in. We see this very first dip when the users stop working with their coworkers and start trying to complete Quantum tasks on their own. It's not really that difficult, but it definitely starts to slip. As users gain confidence because they're doing the tasks over and over again, they start going up quite rapidly. They know what they're doing, but they don't know why they're doing it. Then we get to the peak of the second curve here, and oh my goodness, they get it. They understand how to do their job in the system. This is where I like to stop for primary users. As long as they know how to do their job in Quantum, I'm happy. But not all users are happy with just learning what they need to know in the system. As you can see, we have a lot more curve left to go. So we start going back down this curve. This is usually when we start learning about table relationships and SQL. We think we might not have any idea what quantum is talking about at all. And certainly when we start getting to reports and forms and Crystal, we are basically back at the beginning. We have no idea how quantum works. We've just started venturing into a whole new world of script work. But once we start getting used to script work, we definitely start increasing our knowledge very quickly until, now the users are so much better at quantum that they know enough to tell you how to use the system better. This is the group I like to call power users. And that is my quantum learning curve. Now that's a lot to take in, so my advice is always to start with the basics. And we're going to get started today with a little bit of a pop quiz. First question. Do you know what a database is used for? You'd be surprised. A lot of people have no idea. They've never been asked before. A database is used for data collection. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. I can handle that. Why is data collection important? I don't know that anyone has ever asked me that before. Well, data is used for managing and tracking the progress in our business. Oh, okay. Well, why do I care? You care because information in equals information out. And you require information to do your job, and so does everybody else. So you have to understand how important information is and what your role is in providing that information down the line. So that's where I'd like to get into what a front-end system means. To me, the front-end system definition is really about the person that is entering the quote is also building the invoice. That first data that gets entered into the system to start any order or transaction is going to be carried throughout the entire transaction's life all the way through to the end. So if you're thinking about what your role is in the data collection process, just always try and think about the next person in the workflow. If you're going to take 5 extra minutes to populate fields, or even let's say 5-10 seconds extra to populate a couple of fields, you're going to end up saving someone many, many hours down the line when they realize the data that they require is missing. Getting into common terms, modules, headers, fields, tables, audit trails. I think this is boring to read it from a slide, so let's go ahead and switch back over and look at quantum. Okay, so when we look at quantum, we're talking about the common terms. So modules are going to be all these little buttons along the top. If you scroll over them very slowly, they're going to tell you exactly what they are for, and they actually even give you a little hotkey there to get to the module faster. This is not the only way to get to modules. You can always click on the module button, and then you have a list of modules where you can read the word rather than try and memorize the picture. Modules just mean these are different sections of the system. You're able to purchase these different components, different modules from Component Control. And not everybody has every button, but certainly Avimax has a lot of them. When we start talking about headers, I want to get and open a couple of different modules here. So here's the sales order. I just clicked on the main sales order button, and it comes up with a very blank order. This is the header information up here. A header information is going to be all of the data that's applicable to the entire order that's going to live with this set of transactions all the way through to the end. And if I go and look at a repair order, it's also going to have this header information with a lot of the same boxes as the sales order. Purchase order is going to be very similar, and so is our work order system. And because I'm showing you, it's going to freeze a little bit on me, but maybe that's okay. Fields in quantum look a little bit Oh, now I'm frozen. How many people experience this every day? Wonderful. Okay, so now we're back into work orders, and we have more headers with very similar information that we were capturing in the sales order and the repair order. Repair order, sales order, repair order. So very much looking the same. Every single different module I open looks the same. So when we talk about fields, that's going to be the actual place where data lives. A table is a place where you can select data from a drop-down menu. You don't actually have to type it. And then everywhere within the system, we also see audit trails. And I'll get into those more specifically in a little bit here. So let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So working with commonalities throughout the system, I just showed you a lot of the screens and tabs look very similar. They have an Excel look and feel in the grid section, and all of the different modules look very much the same and have the same characteristics. Common patterns in drop-down menus. So we're looking here at a screenshot of different modules, and in the example we just went through, I was clicking the main button, but here we've clicked the drop-down menu beside the module, and we can see repetitive information regardless of which module we're opening. We can see that Open Add is always in the first section of the drop-down menu. The second section is covered by searches, and again, in every single module, you're going to see a search in the second section of information. The other commonality is that every single one of these drop-down menus is going to have some sort of forms and reports. Repair order, guys, I don't know what happened here, but repair order is above everyone else's, where forms and reports are usually at the bottom of the screen. All right, I talk about this every single year at Quantum, so if you haven't heard it already, listen up. You're going to definitely hear it again. Header, guts, and other stuff. This is the way that I describe how to look at information when you're in Quantum to new users. A lot of the time I'm doing a screen share, or they're emailing me, or they're phoning me because they have no idea what they're doing. And so I have to try and get them to at least speak the same language as I am as I'm going through and asking them to click different buttons. So here I've described the header. We looked at that together already. The second portion is the guts. This is where a little bit more detailed information about the order lives. And then at the bottom, we have other stuff. And this changes from module to module, but it too is additional detail of what the guts is of the header. So if we switch back over to Quantum, headers, guts, other stuff. This is a work order. So we have our different tabs along the bottom of our work order. In repair order, we don't have the tabs, but we have detailed information about the shipping and receiving of the items within the repair order. If we look at sales order, header, guts, other stuff, the other stuff in sales orders is shipments and reservations. So for the most part, we're seeing exactly the same thing in every single module, except for when we start to get into this other stuff section down here at the bottom. Going back to PowerPoint. Okay. Also within Quantum, you're going to find tabs and scroll bars. In almost every module, you're going to have scroll bars. So we just looked at a work order, which also had tabs. This is really where new users can start to get confused. There is a lot of information on a work package screen. That's what we're looking at right now. And as we continue to learn, we see even more tabs and more scroll bars. So there's just a lot of information on display. What I recommend is making sure you're teaching your employees where their eyeballs should be going. So when you first land on a page, you always want to point your eyes to a certain place. So I always bring everyone up to the header make sure you're in the right work package, make sure that the system is open, etc. So when we're talking about terminology, a lot of different companies use the same words, but they don't necessarily always mean the same thing. So we have work order, work cards, task cards, job cards. Oh my goodness, there's so many variations of the same intention when we're talking about work on aircraft or work on aircraft parts. So what we like to do is change the words a little bit so that it's unique to the company, and when employees are coming in, they understand what we're talking about. It's different, but they're not trying to associate it back to possibly the same term they used in a different company. So when we talk about aircraft maintenance, we often call it work package, and we refer to it as on-wing work. If you're in a WP, you're doing on-wing work. In shop order work orders, we just call this on bench work. If you're a WO, you're on bench work. It just helps to differentiate between the different modules, the different employees that are working in both, and definitely for a new employee, just tries to point them in the right direction in terms of terminology. Once they understand the language that we're talking about in quantum, all of this other learning stuff gets them a lot easier. So, moving on to hotkeys and shortcut keys. I think this is probably my favorite section, and so we'll get in there. When we're looking at any single module, we're going to see the same 3 or 4 hotkeys in a row. This first one is refresh, find, add, edit, and delete. Every single module is going to look exactly the same. So we saw the little quantum icon. I'm supposed to switch over to quantum. So let me do that. And we're going to look all the way here at the teeny tiny bottom of my screen. Refresh, find, add, edit, delete. That's work order. Find, add, edit, delete. That's repair order, sales order, add, find. Oh, charge is in there. Oops. Add, edit, delete. All of very similar within the different modules. Even on our inventory home screen, we're going to find, add, edit, delete. Almost the same, a little bit different, but definitely having some commonalities in where the buttons are does help new users just have that confidence they need to get started. All right. Hotkeys. Hotkeys are identified by the underscore underneath the letter. Sometimes the letter is a different color. But almost all of the time it does have this underscore underneath it. That means you don't have to use your mouse to go into the system and click the button. You can just press the F key on your keyboard and find will open. This helps me navigate many different tasks. I've memorized the hotkey patterns, and it certainly makes my life a lot easier and faster. Our favorite hotkey that we haven't talked about yet is inspect. It's definitely the most useful hotkey. Everyone at HaveMax has a fond feeling for inspect. It definitely gets you all over the quantum system very quickly to see the information in all the different areas. So you can use I to inspect a reference on a table. So here in this example, we have we're looking at a repair order. We see the receiving number of the repair order. We're able to highlight that receiving number and press inspect, and it's going to take us directly to the receiver module itself and that receive order. So we can see the detail that the receiving inspector entered. It's very useful. All right, we have to enter dates almost everywhere, specifically on the headers. Here's an example of an adding work order screen. We have the opening and need dates. One of the tips that we try and teach everyone is that you can open a calendar just with the F4 key. You put your cursor within the field, press F4, and a calendar pops up. Now, quantum wouldn't be quantum if it didn't have 8 different ways to do the same thing. So another favorite way of mine to manage dates is just hit the down arrow. When you're in the field, hit the down arrow on your keyboard and a calendar pops up. Another tip is if you're typing, you don't actually need to go and pick the date from the calendar. But if you're typing the date, you don't have to put in dashes or slashes between the month, the day, and the year. You can just type all of the numbers in a row, and Quantum will figure out that it's a date and put the dashes or slashes in there. Alt plus O. This is another one of my most favorite set of hotkeys. When you're able to go into a window screen within Quantum, just using hotkeys, enter your information, tab, tab, tab to get through all of the different fields. Your system administrator can actually set up the tab pattern, so make sure you bother them about that. But then you get to the end of the screen and you have to move your mouse to hit OK. Well, that's actually not true. You can press Alt and O at the same time, and that's going to press OK for you. So that's extremely helpful, especially as you get more and more familiar with hotkeys. You can move through this very, very quickly, and then you can just press Alt O to actually save your changes and get out of the screen. All right, other hotkeys. You don't have to press the X button, move your mouse to actually hit X. You can hit the escape key. Now, even when I watch Component Control do screen shares with me, they always go and hit the X button, and it drives me bananas. Like, just hit the exit key, it's so much faster. But maybe I'm just a little bit too in love with hotkeys, but there you have it. You just hit escape instead of actually pressing the X. Other hotkeys. So we talked about earlier fields versus tables. So here's an example of adding a new sales order. A field is this guy here with no button at the side, and a table is a field with one of the little buttons at the side. You can move your mouse and go and click the little button, or you can just press your down arrow on your keyboard. It'll bring up the table, and then you can enter the correct selection, hit enter on your keyboard, and it then populates the table field for you. When we're looking at modules, of course, there's hotkeys to actually jump directly to the module. I'm not sure why you do that. I've never actually used these, but they're kind of neat, so we thought we'd include them. Inventory control is Control plus 1. Aircraft maintenance, Shift Control plus C. Gets a little interesting once we run out of letters, but it's always a fun way to learn how to manipulate Quantum. We have one user in our organization that moves faster than the screens can load. It's all keyboards. He looks like a programming genius, but it's all these hotkeys. See, we have these underscores underneath the letters. Again, those are our hotkeys. Okay, so looking at your search results, this is a little bit different topic, but when we're getting into searching for different information, you're actually able to control the color of the information that's recorded. So in your global settings, you have to go talk to your system administrator for this, but you can change the status colors so that closed is red and open is black, for instance. We've gone further, selected, this is usually reservations that we're talking about when we say selected. Printed, that's an accounting term, right? We're printing the invoice or printing the batch before we post it. So printed but not posted is green, posted red, and black for everything else. So it certainly helps when you're looking at a table to have your colors just point you in the direction of what's actually open and closed here. Okay, more buttons. Down at the bottom of any of your search screens, you're going to have next, previous buttons. Now, this has to do with your fetch size. If all of your data is available in one screen, you will not have color on your buttons. They will both be grayed out. If there is data not displaying on the screen because of fetch size, you have to fix the fetch size, or you're going to have to hit this next button. If you ever try and do a search within a search grid, it's definitely frustrating. You can't sort any of the columns or data because there's multiple pages of columns and data. So we'll look at that here in a moment. The inspect button versus the edit button. Now, a lot of times this is very similar. It gives us very similar results. You can control the different levels of security within Quantum. So if you want people to be able to see, but you don't want people to edit and actually change the data in the system, you can do this with different security levels. It's usually view versus edit. But basically both of them are going to bring you to the same place if you have access to both buttons. See, same place. Okay, what are your right-click options? If you are anywhere in Quantum on a grid and you right-click, you're going to get a number of different options that you can review. Save to your personal settings, restore default settings, export. Here's your fetch size. I will go over that in just a few minutes. Then we have our search results, search again. This is very handy. So I was just talking about this next button. So if we're doing a search within a grid and you have the next button colored, that means you have multiple pages of data to look at. You can just hit F3 and it'll keep looking to the next page to the next page until it finds the information that it's looking for. When you're in a grid, you can customize the appearance. So here we have very silly text. In your right-click options, you have the ability to edit column titles and change fonts. So here's an example where we've edited the columns. You can change it to whatever words you like. This only works on your screen. It's not going to push to other users. So if for whatever reason you don't like the word status, you can go in and change that word to something that makes more sense to you. You can change title fonts and play with this if you would like. I think this is mostly to do with which kinds of fonts are you used to reading from. Maybe the younger generations are used to more Arial type fonts, where older generations are used to looking at Times New Roman. It really depends on how your eyes work best in the system, but I guess the point is that you can make it do all sorts of things to customize it to your preferences. Okay. Now, forms and reports and data in and information out, all of these things that we were talking about, is because we like to take data out of the system to report on the progress in our businesses. When we take data out of the system, you can do that in a number of different ways. Building reports using the standardized reports that are in the system, but sometimes you just need raw data to make your own report. Certainly when you don't have a reports writer in-house, or you're waiting for other people to build a report for you, it becomes quite handy to just build the report yourself. Maybe you only need to see this data once, so you're not going to take it much further than the one extract. It doesn't actually need to be a formal report that you receive every day, every week. So what you can do is in any grid within Quantum whatsoever, you can just hit the export data, right-click, export data, and save the entire grid into your network files. Then it's an Excel CSV file, then you're able to manipulate it into any report that you would like. Now make sure that when you're within a grid and you're going to do an export, that both your next and previous buttons are gray. If they are not gray, it is only going to export the data on that front page. Okay, customizing your menus and toolbars. Everywhere you look, you see these little tiny arrows in Quantum. We see the arrows beside the modules. That's not the buttons that we're talking about this time. This time we're talking about the little arrow at the very end of the set of buttons. If you click that arrow, you get this add or remove buttons. It prompts you to show you all of the different modules that you can have on display. So if you're a component control customer like AvMax, and we have a lot of different modules, but perhaps you're in receiving inspection and you don't need to see any of the accounting modules, maybe not even the work order modules, you can come into the add and remove buttons option and just turn off all of the modules that you don't need to see. It certainly helps when you're learning or having new users learn, only see the buttons that are relevant to them. So here's just the example. These are a lot of different buttons that we can click this little arrow at the side here and have it removed. So before we had many, many buttons. After we only have the buttons that are pertinent to our specific job role. Buttons. Okay. So before we move on, I just want to go through one more set of customizing menus. You can actually custom the bottom of Quantum as well. And in every single module, we talked about this a little bit earlier, our find, add, edit, delete buttons. So this is at the very bottom of the screen and consistent within every single module. You're able to customize these as well. This is cut off a little bit, but there is a little arrow on the side here where you can drop down and see that add, edit buttons or add, remove buttons button. So here's before and here's after. So you can actually add, oh, there's our little button that was missing. You can add so many more extra buttons that it actually makes a second row. And anytime you see these little lines beside, you can grab that and drag it around. So if you don't like the order, you can grab this one and drag it up here, drag the track changes downwards. A lot of ways to customize Quantum. Okay, there is a whole bunch of additional menus and tools. So we decided that we wanted to move our modules around. We clicked the little arrow, we saw that. We're able to move the buttons at the bottom of the screen around, but we're also able to do things like add a calculator, add a speed bar, add a button directly into your security. If you're a system administrator, for example, and maybe you have that security button handy. And lots of other different ways to customize your toolbar. All again available from that drop down, that little arrow beside the buttons. When we're in grids, let me just switch over back to Quantum. I need a password first because I talked too long. And then I will switch you back into my Quantum account. Okay. So let's just go over that quickly. On this little button here, I'm clicking in the corner, add and remove buttons, Windows bar, reset toolbar, and it disappeared on me. And customize. Customize is in here. This is where we're going to find our calculator. Am I going to lie to you now? I swear it's in here. Aha. Okay, there it is, calculator. So I'm going to turn on calculator, and then it pops up here at the top. There's my calculator. I want a speed bar. It's got a couple of the different buttons. The user settings, this drop-down menu up here, users, that's where your speed bar comes from. The Windows bar at the bottom, I can make that appear and disappear. The help feature, event managers, system browsers. So that's kind of cool. You get a direct search there. We don't need that anymore because you have this lovely global search button, which we'll talk about in a moment. Your user settings. So This again, you're not really going to need this on a regular basis, but there's just so much, so much that you can customize. So let's go through and add and remove buttons here from the top. I don't need forms and reports today. I'm going to regret this later. I'm sure of it. Oh, I'm in demo. Okay, that's okay. I can turn off data services and stock market. So see watch here at the end. Stock market there, stock market not there. So that's always fun. Which button did we leave? Oh, we left a calculator. 5 plus 5 equals 10. Awesome. This is why I'm not an accountant, but that might be fun for some of you out there that don't have a calculator handy to know that you can add one directly to your modules bar taskbar. All right, what was I talking about? Oh, customizing your grids. Okay, so there's a couple of different places where you can customize grids. We're going to talk about inventory, but you can also do it in company management. Once that loads, I can show you that. And so company management is loading. There it goes. And you have grids in here. If we look at a work order, you have a research tab in work order. And again, you have a bunch of custom grids. This is only available in a couple of different modules, but it's certainly useful to know how to manipulate the data that's here. So it's at your fingertips whenever you need it. So let's go to inventory and we'll mess around with the inventory customization. So I'm going to go and right click on the blue bar and configure my browses. This screen pops up. And certainly when the first time you look at this, it can be a little bit intimidating. But what you're going to do is all of the different data points that you have available to you are listed up here. And you can drag them and drop them. So I clicked on stock summary up here and I'm dragging it down over customer quote history. I let go and it becomes stock summary. Very cool. We talked about Quantum having tabs and scroll bars almost everywhere. You can actually add tabs to your inventory screen. So if you need more information that's available, you can come up here and add a tab. You can add more rows. Let's say I want 3 rows of data instead of 2 rows of data. Let's go 2 tabs just for the sake of showing you what is going on. I'm going to hit rebuild. It's going to lose my current configuration, but that is okay because I want the new configuration. So once I press OK, I can see all of the changes that I made. I wanted 3 rows, so now I have 3 rows, and I also have 2 tabs. So this is just a whole bunch of unassigned data because I don't have any reason for this many pieces of data in my system. So I'm going to change it back. Go ahead and hit rebuild. And then it takes me back to how I preferred it to have it. But there's lots of different options in here depending on the type of business you have or the role that you're in to customize these grids and make your life a lot easier. So when I press OK, it's going to change my screen and it's going to bring stock summary data into the live system where I need it to be. Yeah, so if I went to company management, the same problem. I can configure my browsers here. I guess not same problem, same difference. Same idea, how many tabs, how many rows, how many columns, hit rebuild, and then grab whichever you would like and drag it into the different box. It changes. You can press OK, and the data is presented to you there. I think the work order research tab is probably the most useful place. This is also available in work packages. And for project managers or people that are managing the project that need to see all of the different data at the same time, this is definitely a great place for that. I even like to build reports from here. Parts management can list all of your bill of materials, but you don't also get to see the task or the labor at the same time. So it's kind of nice to have it all in a research grid And of course, again, you can just right click and configure. You have to be on the blue bar. If I right click on the white grid, I get this custom export, field settings, save to your personal settings, all of that fun stuff that I showed you a couple slides ago. So if you want to actually configure the browse, you have to right click on the blue. Okay, what does the slide say that I need to show you next? It wants to talk about inventory management. So let me switch over back to the slide presentation. Okay, I said at the beginning of this that the best place for users to start is the inventory management module, just because there's so many of our businesses that are going to have parts as the main, let's say, the main source of movement within the different modules of Quantum. Labor doesn't necessarily move so much between different modules. Parts definitely does. So let's look at parts, and there's a couple of extra buttons I wanted to talk to you about. So is Quantum's nature. There's 5 or 6 or 10 or 11 ways to do the exact same thing. For fun, we have the old school labels up here, the module buttons. Let me just flip over. Can I do this quickly? Because I'm distracted. So now you guys get to be distracted. So I'm back in Quantum. Up here under View, I can switch it to the legacy icons if I want to, and then I get these old school buttons. View. I can make the buttons little teeny tiny buttons if I want. View. I want large buttons, and I want the new buttons. Ooh, what's highlight buttons do? Interesting. Okay. And then there's skins in here. Some people play with this. I definitely don't take the time to do that. But you can, all sorts of fun stuff up here. There's another way to access the calculator option. We'll turn that off for now. No, I have to restart. Okay, well that's why I probably never messed with it before. Let's go back to my slideshow. Okay, so along the side of inventory management, this is what we're talking about. I got distracted with the old school buttons. Along the side, you also have quick access buttons, although most of the time you're able to access this data directly from the grids or the tabs here at the top. So this first button here, this is contacts. This is actually the old version of contacts button. Links. Anyways, it would appear over here on the side. There he is there. It's just a quick access button. Next, this is documents and images. So we know we can attach document images to pretty much everything. But one thing we like to do is attach documents and images to master parts in order to reference alternate or next higher assembly numbers, that sort of thing. So it's a quality control program. People didn't believe us that alternate part numbers were truly alternates. So we attach the documents and images to the master part. If the master part has documents, the button will appear. If there's no data in the documents and images, the button won't appear. Okay, the building blocks. This is your quick access to your inventory grid screen, but you can do that directly from one of these grids, or that's your alternate part numbers. You can click on alternate part numbers and get your X references right there and there. So this is what I was talking about. Instead of hitting the little building blocks button, I like to hit F9 on my keyboard because I'm a hotkeys girl. And F9 opens your live inventory the same way as this little button here does it. So remember, let me go back one. When you're in these grids, you can make sure that the data doesn't display by checking these little tiny boxes in the corner on or off. This is all about operating speed. So if you have a lot of data in your system and it is running slower, potentially one solution for you is to turn off all these little box dudes on your grid. And then the inventory module, for example, will load much faster. Then you can, once you're in the grid and you're working with this data, you can go just check the little box and the information appears for you. Okay, global search. Global search was a very cool new tool. I think Component Control released it in mod version 10, I want to say. You actually don't have to go and navigate all the way to the module that you want to search. So we talked about those module buttons. You go to the drop-down menu, you hit search. You can skip all of that if you actually have the order number handy, and just go directly to search or global search at the top of your Quantum screen and enter in the number that you want to search. This doesn't search everything. I think we're missing RMAs and work order, work package billings, but we're getting better, and it's certainly a lot handier than clicking 3 or 4 different buttons to get to a search. You can go directly and global search the entire system. For this example as a repair order. The navigation menu. I don't really use this, but some people that are doing repetitive tasks are definitely in here a lot. In the navigation window, it keeps record of all the different modules and work orders, work packages, repair orders, all of the different transactions that you were just in. So if you're investigating or you're working within work order, work package at the same time, sales order, repair order at the same time, it's going to list all of the most recent transactions that you edited. And so you can just pop into navigation and backtrack to the last entry that you were looking at. Required fields. This is a tool I don't believe is available to everyone. I believe this is a special module or special add-on that AppMax has purchased. It certainly helps. I want to call it screen editor, screen designer, one of those two. It helps to new users if the fields are highlighted. And it helps you make sure that the required information, that information in information out, is recorded consistently. So here's our work order module. We have all of the information that we require recorded. And then in our work package module, we have the required information. There's just a lot of boxes on the job card for a new user to understand where to go. So definitely as we highlighted the different fields, it certainly helped new users know exactly where their eyeballs should be on a particular screen and what data is required. Now this actually prevents them from pressing OK without entering the data, so that's also very handy. Here we have a tip that if you press Alt plus the letter of the work order type, it'll set the radio button for you. This is more on the screen changes tools that are available for you through Quantum. Here we have 2 different databases. We have our inventory Canadian database and then our engine inventory database. We've customized the fields. So here, for example, we're able to move the lot number. And I've actually taken some of the user-defined fields that are available in the middle of the inventory grid and made them completely different fields and arranged them in a different way. I'm actually able to change the description of the text. So here, because this is an engine-specific only system, I was able to change the receiver number to engine number. As an example to show you here. Okay, I've mentioned audit trails at the beginning and how important they are, but definitely so everyone knows and new users understand, every keystroke, let's say most every single keystroke that you make is recorded in some sort of history table. So you're able to see who did what, when they did it, and most of the time the descriptions are pretty good. Sometimes it just says update or unknown update, which is not helpful, but it's definitely better than it once used to be. So I can see exactly who did the status change in this particular example and the day, minute, and second in which they did it. This helps a lot when you're dealing with new users and you want to teach them the mistakes they made, or prove that they were the ones that made the mistake, or let's say you're investigating and someone's blaming somebody else for it. Anyway, audit trails are very interesting. You want to know what happened, someone deleted information. Audit trails are definitely the way to prove that out and access historic transactions, who did what when. Very important. All tables look exactly the same. We've kind of talked about this before. One of the tools, this is our browsing application, so against the master part. This is also on your ship order or ship via, ship account. In various different tables, you have a sequence number. What you're able to do with this is the default is set, I believe, to 99. If there's common application codes for this example, or ship via codes that you use all of the time, you can sequence them. So the most common ones are number 1, and they appear at the top of your table. You don't have to go look for them alphabetically or with this find button. You're just able to see it directly here at the top of the table based on the sequence number that was set. Okay. I probably should have left this slide way up there when we were talking about search grids, but fetch size. So when you're looking at a grid in Quantum, it's only pulling a certain amount of data into that particular screen. And for some companies that have a lot of information in their Quantum database, fetch size can actually be a tool to help speed up the operations of Quantum. So if you find that your users are experiencing a lot of lag, or it just takes a long time to load a certain screen, make sure you check the fetch sizes on that screen. If they're set to -1, what that's going to mean is that previous next combination I was talking about, they're both going to be grayed out because all of the data is pulling in to that one view. If you're trying to do an export, for example, this is a good thing. To do an export, you want your fetch size to be -1, which means give me everything in this view. But if you're in a work package, let's say, and you have 1,000 job cards, maybe you only want your fetch size to say 50, and that way your work package is going to load a lot faster. Just like when we looked at the inventory module and we were customizing those grids, you can turn the little checkbox on and off. That's all about making Quantum faster. So fetch size, make sure if you're exporting it that your fetch size is the -1. If you're experiencing lag because there's just so much data that Quantum is trying to populate at the same time, change your fetch size to something smaller, 50, 100, 200, something like that. All right, so we're almost done. I went through a whole bunch of tips, so I hope you're following along still. There's lots to cover, and it's definitely exciting. I love to use all of the different tricks. It makes me feel like I'm a Quantum super user. Maybe I am, but I definitely didn't start out that way. Hotkeys and different tricks that I learned definitely helped. One of the other things that I always seem to ask is, how does Quantum hierarchy work? Like, which module is more important than the next module? I think some people would ask this question more often if they're building forms and reports and they're talking about table hierarchy and all of that fun stuff, which is not in my wheelhouse. I have fancy friends that know how to do their scripting work. But this next bit is a little bit definitely helpful to trying to understand and educate the new users on how data flows through the system. We talked about front end system. So the very first thing that you ever have to do in the system, you cannot sell a part, you cannot buy a part, you cannot repair an airplane, an aircraft part. You cannot do anything without first having a company set up. This is all about that front end system relationship. So you want to launch a purchase order, for example. Well, who are you launching a PO to? Who are you buying parts from? Who are you selling parts to? Who are you repairing parts with? Who are you repairing parts for? You cannot start anything without having data in a company management table. This consists of your customers and vendors, all their addresses and contact information, all of that fun stuff. So as I was talking about, you can't really do anything in the system without parts. So the very first thing to do is you have to have inventory. So let's go buy some inventory. We can't buy inventory unless we know who we're buying it from. So company comes first. Then we got to go buy some stuff. Once we buy stuff, you can receive it through the receiving inspection module if you have that module, or you can just do a quick receive directly from the purchase order. The receiving inspection module just gives you a little bit more tools to do those quality control checks, and it gives you a lot more access to the fields that you're updating in the stock table. So you know who you're buying it from, you know that you're buying stuff, and that you've received it once it's arrived. When you receive an item, it then moves into the accounting side of the software because you have to pay for the item. So you're able to do a receiver reconciliation. Did you receive all the items that you said you were going to receive? Were they good? Were they bad? Do they need to be returned? Are you happy? If you're happy with a receiving inspection, your receiving rec will likely match your purchase order. But let's say it doesn't because your vendor gave you a discount. The accounting team is able to go into the receiver rec and make that slight adjustment to the cost, which pushes everything back up to affect the receiving inspection. And then you're able to actually pay for it, right? And write a check to the vendor that you bought stuff from. Okay, so we've paid for stuff, we've received some stuff, now we have inventory. Once we have inventory, there's so many things, all of the things. We can do all of the things once we have inventory. You can sell stuff, you can fix stuff, you can install it on stuff, and then you can create other stuff with the stuff, right? When you're selling something, it's going to leave the system through ship management. Manufacturing, for example, doesn't leave the system necessarily through ship management or a sales order. It then becomes inventory, which flows down to sales orders and ship orders, or work orders and aircraft maintenance orders. Once something is sold, it needs to be invoiced. We're including work orders here because labor gets to get invoiced as well. Once you send an invoice out, now you have moved back over to the accounting side of the world so that you can process the receivable. You know that somebody owes you money. So once you actually receive the money that people owe you, you get to enter the cash receipt, and everything flushes out in the general ledger. So this is the hierarchy of quantum modules, how they talk to each other, how they flow together. Certainly all of the different pieces make a little bit more sense when we lay them out like this. Okay, I am definitely done talking. Wow, that's a lot of time I talked for. So, key points to take home. I advise making some common terminology. Just because you use the term work order or task card, maybe the employee that you're bringing in uses the word job card, or I said task card already, work card, or. So make sure that there's common terms that your employees understand so they feel a little bit more confident when you're walking them through and teaching them how to use Quantum. Point out the common patterns in the system. We saw the blank gray screen at the beginning of this. That's extremely intimidating. There's so many buttons, there's so many fields, there's just so much information that's on display to brand new users. And once you get a little bit more experience, that's definitely helpful, but it's certainly intimidating. So if you point out the common patterns between all of the different modules, it just gives them a little bit more confidence that if they learn one module, they're very likely to succeed in other modules. Teach employees hotkeys is certainly a fun way to get your data entered a lot faster. Excuse me. Show employees how to customize their screens so they aren't so overwhelmed. Sometimes the data that's displayed means absolutely nothing to these people, to the people that you're teaching. If they are in the repair shop versus in the warehouse versus on the floor fixing aircraft, they may have completely different needs for their screens. Setting it up and customizing it for their specific needs, again, it all plays into this confidence that we need to be providing brand new employees, brand new Quantum users. Show employees where they fit in the order of events. At the beginning of this presentation, we talked about front-end system and how important it is that if you spend 5 seconds extra on your data entry, it's going to save hours and hours of entry later on in the system. If someone understands truly how they affect the chain of events, then they can participate in a little bit more effective way. So a lot of the times we talk to them about supply chain or business process, how a part flows through a repair station, how an aircraft begins and ends in maintenance, or how a sale exchange turns into a repair, comes back. Oh my goodness, there's so many ways that we can talk about sales, but understanding the order of events of data is also extremely important. So if you are someone that's in sales and you're making quotes, does those salespeople understand that they're essentially building the work order, work package, repair order, sales order because they entered a quote? Do the receivers know that the data that they're entering gets then pushed to a work package and onto a job card or a task card where the customer ends up seeing this information? If the employee knows where they fit in the order of events, they're going to be a lot more successful with how the data is entered in the system, and they're going to take on that accountability because they want their coworkers to all be successful and avoid yelling at them. All right, so the Q Group is an excellent place for all sorts of information. The Q Group board has been working really, really hard during the 15th anniversary to put so much new information up there, so make sure you check out qgroup.org. If you can't find the information, you can definitely reach out on our forums, and one of our excellent members will try and answer the question for you. Now, if it's a bug or or an enhancement, or it's just something weird that's going on with Quantum, you can always visit Component Control and try and get, you can always get technical support to call you back, or hire a professional services to give you a trainer to get in more in-depth look at Quantum. But definitely check out the Q Group because there's just so much information in there. Just like this video is there now. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me for this tips and tricks session for new users. I appreciate you spending the time with me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of our conference. First ever virtual conference. Happy 15th anniversary.